on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I'm a bit perplexed. The big guy, Mr. 10%, President Biden, did a joint presser with King Abdullah II from Jordan.
Yeah.
Talking about the situation in the Middle East and Gaza. This is after he said in that presser on Thursday night that Bibi Netanyahu's response to the Hamas terrorist attack of October 7th is over the top. He added this.
The past 4 months, as the war has raged, the Palestinian people have also suffered unimaginable pain and loss. Too many of the over 27,000 Palestinians killed in this conflict have been innocent civilians and children, including thousands of children. And hundreds of thousands have no access to food, water, or other basic services. Many families have lost not just one, but many relatives, and cannot mourn for them, even bury them, because it's not safe to do so. It's heartbreaking.
So then, given that, why would you be demanding $11 billion in aid to Israel?
He's speaking out of both sides of his mouth.
And then we'll throw a couple billion to Hamas. I mean, they'll say the residents of Gaza, but it goes to United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which basically operates as some sort of half-assed front group for Hamas. What tunnel below our HQ? Wow. Where did this come from? 14 people have to be fired, 12 or 14 people have to be fired from that agency because they were active participants in the plotting and providing of material support for the terrorist attack. This is what has, I think, regular Americans perplexed if they've read into this at all. It's sort of the same thing that we talked about with Ukraine and Russia. We need another $60 billion to Ukraine, and we also need to continue to cripple our domestic energy sector so that we can enrich the Russians and the Iranians. Huh? What? Which side are we on? Are we even on our own side? It's hard to keep track. For more on this, Fred Fleitz joins us, Vice Chair of the America First Policy Institute, Center for American Security. He previously served as National Security Council Chief of Staff, a CIA analyst, and a House Intel Committee staff member. Fred, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so, right, the jawboning of Bibi by Biden, but yet if you don't vote for this $95 billion, that's mainly for Ukraine, and then second place is Israel and on down the line, then you're a Putin stooge, you're letting Gazans suffer, you're not supporting the Israeli attempt to eradicate Hamas. You're not doing a lot of things that are all going to get fixed with $95 billion.
Yeah, I think you have it right. Netanyahu has made it clear that if the Israeli Defense Forces are not able to move into the Rafah area and to destroy the final 4 Hamas battalions, people who were saying they should call this off are basically calling for Israel to lose the war. This is essential to the war. Israel is going to make provisions to move people out of the way. And I know the war is horrible. Israel didn't start this war, but Israel is going to stop it. People forget the genocidal attacks on Israeli citizens on October 7th, the fact that Hamas is still holding hostages. And, I mean, we know what's going on with Biden. We know that his progressive left is furious about the war. This is hurting Biden badly in the polls. And the Democratic Party wants this war over immediately, because if it isn't over immediately, they know they're going to lose the presidential election to Donald Trump.
Well, and so then what? I mean, the House Republicans, just on this foreign aid package, this is being hotly debated, and there's obviously schisms within the GOP ranks per the 19 senators who voted out of the Senate, helped voted out of the Senate. So the House Republicans, Speaker Johnson has said it's DOA. What should their posture be?
Well, I mean, House Republicans are saying that there has to be a decent bill on the border. The last bill was not a good bill. I know there's some Democrats, some in the media, who said that it was. And Biden is getting away with being able to keep the border open through this bill. That's why House Republicans aren't for it. They want a serious bill, serious language protecting the border. That means ending amnesty, returning to remain in Mexico, and other provisions to take care of this border influx of illegal migrants. But we also know that Biden could close the border now. I mean, the legislation might be a cover for him, but he's not going to close the border just because legislation passes. It has to be legislation with real teeth.
The just this whole sort of concept of and this K.T. McFarland and others have really been beating this drum. You know, we can cripple our enemies, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, by just focusing on the investment and development of our own domestic energy, our own sources of domestic energy. And it turns out that also is relevant with respect to rare earth minerals, which we spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about during COVID. Oh my gosh, the lack of a supply of chips because China has all the rare earth minerals, and we need to decouple from China and be more independent so we're not beholden to them, and so on and so forth. And then just last week, the U.S. could soon surpass China as the world leader in rare earth minerals after more than 2.34 billion metric tons were discovered in Wyoming. That deposit far outpaces what China has in terms of the aggregate amount. So, I mean, it's like we have all of the wherewithal to be independent rather than to be an underwriter of our enemies, and yet we don't do it. There's not a lot of discussion about this. I haven't even seen that much coverage of this discovery in Wyoming. What gives?
Casey's a friend, and she's absolutely right that the way to beat our various enemies is to develop rare earth minerals and to drill, baby, drill. But the reality is that's not going to happen before January 2025, and only if there's a Republican president. The Biden administration is not going to step up domestic energy production. It's not going to go against the environmentalists and get these minerals out of the ground. It's a great idea and concept. We should be talking about it. But this administration is not interested in doing the things that are necessary to fix our economy and to fix our energy consumption.
Your take on the Robert Hur report, and particularly this has been an underreported piece of it. I think you started to get into it a bit in the piece I read over at Newsmax. But Margot Cleveland had a piece in the Federalist as well, Federalist.com. I know everybody's focused on Biden's mental fitness or lack thereof for obvious reasons, but if you actually go back and look at the indices in the report, it turns out a lot of the documents that were ostensibly illegally in his possession had to do with Ukraine. And so now we have another angle into the Biden Incorporated operation and his material support of Hunter's overseas ventures.
I think that's a good point. I say at the outset that if I had done a small portion of what Biden did, I had classified high-level clearances for a long time, I would have lost my clearances, I would have had high legal bills, I would have been fined, I may have went to jail. But if your name is Biden or Clinton, there are different rules. If you take classified documents home with you, remember there were classified documents on Hillary Clinton's home server. I think it's disturbing to see what documents were brought to Biden's home and office, and I don't think this was done deliberately. I know that's what Biden claimed. He said that the documents were in locked cabinets in his house. No, they weren't. Read the report. There's documents in drawers. There's documents in a deteriorating box in the garage, and some of them were on Ukraine, and we know that Hunter Biden had access to his father's home. Did he look at any of these documents? Were they there for him? We just don't know.
I mean, do you think it's just another example of how he's compromised by Ukraine?
You know, I haven't been one to say that Biden's been compromised. I'm as a CIA analyst who's seen my agency wrong so many times, I'm not making that jump. I'm prepared to argue about it. I think that this is an incredibly incompetent president who's been incompetent about national security his whole life. Bob Gates wrote about that in 2011 that Biden was wrong about national security for 40 years, and that's when Biden was a young man. So whether Biden's been compromised by China or Ukraine, I think we need to talk about that. But at a minimum, this is a man who made climate change our top national security concern. And I tell you, the Chinese were just delighted with that. They're happy that we send representatives to China to talk about that rather than the COVID virus or Taiwan or the South China Sea.
You're talking about your former agency, I'm on the CIA specifically, and this is sort of the intelligence apparatus generally, which includes but not as limited to the CIA. It was interesting, Tucker Carlson, after his interview with Putin, I mean, pre his interview with Putin, in the preview to it, and then post in this conference in Dubai that he's at, this sit-down he gave, talked about how here we go again with the Obama administration's surveilling journalists or talk show hosts, whatever, improperly trying to interfere in expressions of freedom of the press, which I believe is still enshrined in the First Amendment. And Carlson said he'd been trying to get this interview with Putin for 3 years, and the Biden administration had been monitoring his emails, had been intercepting, had done enough that it came to the attention of the Russians, and it spooked them such that it took him 3 years to get this interview with Putin. And when he discovered, and it was confirmed, that they had been meddling with his communications, he sort of redoubled the efforts to get the interview because of obvious reasons. I mean, just this whole conversation again, from Eric Holder and James Rosen to the Twitter files to Tucker Carlson to this cyber threat intelligence league that we're hearing about. I mean, the intelligence apparatus within the federal government and how central this should be to the conversation in the run-up to November.
I wrote 3 articles for the Federalist, I think it was last year, on how an NSA whistleblower revealed that NSA was spying on Tucker Carlson. It's not up for debate. They were clearly doing this. And I think it had to do with the Biden administration worried about Tucker Carlson's communications with Russia, which as a private citizen, he's allowed to do. But, as a journalist, it's a different matter. And there'll never be any accountability for this. There'll never be any investigations. But go to thefederalist.com, look up Fred Fleitz, and you'll find at least 3 articles where I go over this.
And these other moving parts where we're getting new information on a regular basis from the investigative work of Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger and others. These cutouts like NewsGuard, they're trying to get ahead of the Missouri v. Biden decision that's coming down, where per the Twitter files, where the government was impressing upon social media companies what they wanted them to do in terms of censoring this person and deleting this comment and so forth. And now they're just going to outsource it to a bunch of former Intel people like General Hayden, who don't need any instruction from the federal government. They know what to do. And so we still have this huge problem of the big tech collaboration with the Intel community to suppress within those circles, unpopular viewpoints.
Our intelligence agencies really have to be cleaned out. We have to have a new president to put in decisive leadership to restore them to the role that they're supposed to play in promoting our national security, not meddling in domestic politics. And I mean, the whole workforce has to understand what the culture has to be. The culture isn't resistance. It's not helping Democrats and hurting Republican presidents. I was a CIA analyst for 19 years, and I'm afraid that's what I saw. And it got much worse starting with the Obama administration. Unfortunately, the Trump administration did not clean out our intelligence agencies. I think if Trump is reelected, there will be some major house cleanings.
Yeah, hopefully a lesson learned. Fred Fleitz, Vice Chair of the America First Policy Institute Center for American Security, previously served as National Security Council Chief of Staff, also CIA analyst and a House Intelligence Committee staff member. Fred, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The following is a paid political announcement.
I'm Dr. Kent Mercado, and I'm running for Congress in the 11th District. I'm a physician, attorney, humanitarian, father, and husband, and I have had the privilege of speaking with